Good afternoon, Professor and everyone. This is the mini 3 presentation group 4. Our member is Angie, Nadia, Rohan, and me, Jolene. And our topic is ABCP crisis in Canada reflection. And our agenda includes summary, triggers, regulator, how effective, who has harmed, remanufactions for society, 2 stories, and the current states and improved. First of all, I'm going to share the summary of what happened in ABCP crisis. The ABCP stands for the asset-backed commercial paper market crisis unfolded in 2007, when the 350 billion contracts occurred over 5 months during August to December. This contraction transformed concern about the credit quality of mortgage-related assets into the global financial crisis. The panic began as concerns about ABCP's exposure to subprime mortgage emerged. Investors attempted to sell their ABCP holdings, leading to the substantial run on ABCP programs. Liquidity arrangements failed when banks, including the H Bank, declined to provide emergency cash to the trusts issuing ABCP due to loosely worded legal agreements. The crisis had wide-ranging effect affecting hundreds of companies, pension plans, governments, and over 2,000 retail investors, many of whom were unaware that their ABCP holdings were laden with risky derivatives. And what triggers this crisis? First of all, I think the primarily roots in concern about the exposure of ABCP to subprime mortgage and the subsequent panic among the investors. And investors may feel panic and they start to sell their ABCPs. And this selling make it run on to all the investors. And in 2007, Convergery Company, the manufacturer of ABCP, disclosed its small exposure to subprime mortgages, which promoted Toronto-based credit agency, DBRS, to review its rating. Investors panicked, insured as they sounded to sell their ABCP holdings, but they couldn't find buyers. Banks, including the H Bank, refused to provide emergency cash to cover maturing paper. These loosely defined legal agreements contributed to the liquidity crash and unlimitedly led to the crisis. And the lack of transparency and information further aggravated the situations, as it was difficult for investors to access the risk associated with ABCP. Let's welcome to the Nadia to introduce the regulator.
Thank you so much, Darlene. I'm going to be talking about the regulators. Based on my research, I realized that there were 3 major regulators: CSA, OSFI, AMF. CSA is the Canadian Securities Administrators. OSFI is the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions. Then AMF is a French term, and they are majorly located based in Quebec. And AMF was partially involved in the ABCP Corporation. And also it is important to note that the primary regulators were CSA and OSFI. And also they intervened because they wanted to stabilize the market. It is also important to note that each province had a regulator. For example, British Columbia had the BCSC, Alberta had the ASC. How effective? It is really unclear on how effective the regulators were. So most people debate. Some say probably it was really effective, others say it wasn't effective. And there are three major things to look at. Resolution, transparency, and risk management. I'm going to start with risk management, and from this we realize that OSFI ensured that banks had enough funds to cover issues and advised them to manage their liquidity risks in order to avoid future issues. The transparency. CSA pushed issuers to be more open about the risk, so investors knew exactly what they were going into. And for the resolution, we realized that they contributed to restructuring the market in order to get to a settlement. They collaborated with parties to transform the frozen ABCP into more stable, longer-term notes. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's welcome Rohan to introduce who was harmed from this crisis.
So I'll talk about who was harmed. People like Yulan Wong, Ron Lawley, Brian Eiler, Ray Lee, Dick Kovics, Mike and Vine Miles faced losses up to 300,000 due to the frozen ABCP, and it caused them stress, lifestyle disruptions, and retirement delays. And lack of support from major banks also added to the stress and everything. And because of all this, up to 1,600 investors were affected, and the crucial upcoming vote on the restructuring plan will shape their financial futures. Now I'm going to talk about the ramifications for society. First, financial meltdown risk. Analysts causing against proceeding without without plan approval, foreseeing potential financial meltdown with broader economic implications. Second is trust collapse concerns. The risk of trust collapse concerns, the risk of trust collapse looms due to stalled notes, posing economic implications beyond individual investors and creating ripple effects on the financial landscape. Third, individual investors' influence. The fate of ABCP market restructuring resets the investors' votes, carrying significant consequences that extended beyond their financial markets, shaping the broader social impact.
We will move on to our two stories. And first of all, the first one is actually it's two news. First one is come from the 2023 Global ABC Conference. They the meetings talk about the ABCP crisis, which happened on 2007, and what the effective to until now. And the second one is from the ABCP Felix Silver Liner. And this guy is Mark Kanier, the then recently appointed governor of the Bank of Canada, and recognizing the potential for disaster if the restructuring didn't get down, stepped in. And let's move on to the next part. It is the current state and the improved. Let's welcome Angie to introduce it.
Thank you, Jolene. Okay, I'll be discussing about the current state and update on ABCP. ABCP, as Jolene has said, is an asset-backed commercial paper. And after the crisis, it's still considered as the fourth largest product segment in the Canadian money market. Despite being secured by a dedicated pool of assets, it is typically issued at a slightly higher yield than the banker's acceptances. For potential for increased funding, survey results suggested that banks could potentially still witness an increase in ABCP funding by up to 12 billion Canadian dollars in a short time frame, contingent on heightened investor demand. Challenges and constraints. Survey respondents identified constraints for increased ABCP supply and demand. There is still a negative perception stemming from past issues, particularly around the great financial crisis, which still linger among some investors. The stigma which is associated with ABCP may be alleviated, though, through increased education about the product. Structural changes and mitigation. One bank has pursued a structural change by introducing a full bank guarantee for its ABCP program, making it equivalent to its BAs and BDNs, or bank deposit notes, from a credit perspective. This reflects an effort to enhance the credibility and attractiveness of ABCP. Factors affecting ABCP market size. While established businesses and asset origination practices are crucial for increasing the assets available for funding through ABCP vehicles. However, developing such practices takes time and can be costly. Maturity mismatch is also another issue, as investors prefer short-dated issuance, while issuers may prefer longer-dated ABCP for stable funding. Jolene?
And that's all about our ABCP commercial crisis reflection. And thanks for your watching.